I'm the Associate Dean of Admission at Pacific Lutheran University. I've been there about 11 years, and before that was at UW-Tacoma and UW-Seattle as well. So about 21 years working in admission. And I'm here to give you a super quick Admission 101 overview, but hopefully one that supports what you're going to hear from the counselors, but also just gives you some little things that you can start doing at home with your children as you think about how are we going to navigate this process. How many of you have a child in college right now? Everyone look around. Those are your experts. So sorry, I just put you on the spot. But I do think sometimes people who have forged the path before you are lovely people to chat with. All right, so I wanted to start with this slide. You guys have the brightest screen in Pierce County. But I promise we'll get to darker slides in a second. I just wanted you to know if your child is like, why are you going to a session tonight on college? I'm a sophomore. This is stressing me out. This is more than I want to think about. They're not alone. So this is just a survey, and I always look at this just to see where students are and what is maybe making them so nervous that they can't move forward, that they feel a little frozen in this process, and maybe there's just some little things they can do to get started. We're going to mostly be talking about four-year colleges, so number 2, number 3, and number 4. But I wanted to just start by making sure we understand there's tons of types of colleges, and that might shape what they're asking for from your children, what they want them to do in high school, how much they're going to cost, where they're located, how big or small they are. But we're going to primarily be talking about four-year college enrollment tonight. So they could be private or public schools, in or out of state. There's still a lot of differences, but there are multiple types of colleges. So as we talk about that, just a reminder. I think the best thing a sophomore can start doing is thinking about what matters to them. Potentially not what matters to all of you, which is a hard part of this, but what matters to them and what's going to make them happy when they go to college, what's going to make them academically successful, what's going to help them achieve their goals when they graduate from college. And those are big questions. So sometimes you can start with something a little bit smaller, like what's your learning style? How do you learn best? Is it in a small classroom setting where my teacher knows who I am? Is it in discussion? Am I good at learning on my own? Do I learn best in a competitive environment? What are those environments in which I learn best in? That's sometimes a question they can answer because they've been in school. That can also help you narrow down colleges, right? Because if they say, I learn best in a competitive environment, a really large research institution might be a great fit. But if they learn best in community, that might be a little bit harder of a fit. So you can start to ask these questions. And then some of these might be better to ask as a junior or a senior, and you're going to talk about your family connection or naviance today. Some of these can be answered for you by a quick search in that tool. So some of these are easy to answer, and some of these are going to take a little bit more time. But maybe just start to ask some of these things or encourage them. We're going to talk about visiting college campuses. Even if it's not the school they want to go visit a small college and see if they like it. Go visit a big college and see if they like it. You live in Tacoma. There are like 5 of us here. It doesn't take you very far to get where you want to go to visit. So just look at some of these questions. But also as a family, start asking some of these questions. For example, the bottom one. It's not what can I pay, it's what am I willing to pay for my child to go to college. Once you know what matters to you, and even before that, you can start to do your research. These slides will be provided to you, right? Okay, I know people are taking pictures. You totally can. It just ends up with a lot of photos of me, sometimes with a weird face. But we will send these to you. So you can go to college fairs, you can get on college websites, you can visit virtually or in person, depending on where they're looking. You can talk to people. You have an amazing counseling department. I'm not just saying that because they invite me to talk. This is one of my favorite places to hang out with them. And there's also just some really great online resources, some of which you have available just by being a Bellarmine student. But this is where you're going to go. You're going to ask questions. You're going to walk around. You're going to just take it all in, and you're going to kind of get some decisions made. How many of you have visited a college campus with a child? Doesn't have to be the sophomore. Fantastic. Were they helpful? What'd you say? It's vital, which I think is exactly what I'm trying. Yes, you can't not do it, right? And you are in a great space in which to do that, not just in Washington, but there's lots of schools all over the West Coast, East Coast. You can fly, go while you're on vacation. But this is some of the things I sometimes see as students, especially the younger students, they get to a college campus and don't know what to ask. They don't know what to look for. But if you've done some of that research already about what matters to you, you start to know what you want to look for. If you come prepared with questions about that thing that matters to you, you have a question prepared. You feel more confident in that. I've been noticing in the last couple years when I ask students, what do you want to study? They say undecided, and they get shy about it, almost apologetic. But I consider those students open-minded, and there's still ways to ask those questions. So just come up with a few of those. And just because there was one, there is a college fair coming up in this area. I always look to see before this event what's available to you. These are free to go to. You and your children can attend at Seattle University on Saturday, April 22nd. I think this one has like 350 colleges, 400 colleges at it. So it's a really large spring college fair. All right, we're going to get to the meat of it. We're going to jump through these 5 parts of a general application pretty quickly, just to give you a little tip along the way. I like to use the acronym TREAT. It's an easy way to remember. So tomorrow is Valentine's Day. I hope you all get some sort of treat, if that's what you like. I made the mistake of stopping at Target before coming here. Don't go. I walked right out. And then I remembered everyone in line had flowers. All right, so T is for transcript. This is what your students are working on. They're not even at the halfway point of it, it feels, right? They're just sophomores. They're almost 2/3 of the way through what we look at. Because really we're seeing a student through their junior year primarily. We don't see their senior year grades when they apply for the most part. So that's why this is actually something important to start thinking about. What's a student's grade trend? We look at that. So sometimes high school starts out a little rough and gets better. That's okay. Are they consistent? What courses are they taking? Depending on the school, they might want to see more rigor, right? More of those advanced level classes. And then ultimately, you'll have to know what you turn in. There are schools that have you self-report your grades. Don't worry, we will help you when you get there. It's way too confusing, I think. But you will ultimately be sharing what you take. But think about grade trend and think about course selection, because now is a great time to kind of set the course forward. R is for recommendation. This is something also you're in a great spot. I read a Bellarmine recommendation this year that made me cry. I think that's a first in 10 years. I've never cried at a recommendation. They're always sweet. But this one, literally, I had to take a walk. It was so nice. So anyway, know that the teachers here put a lot of work into those letters of recommendation, and we do read them. But that's why those relationships with your teachers, developing those, is going to be so important, because you want a teacher who can write about you honestly, which clearly this one did. I would like that student to come to PLU, just letting all of you know. All right. E is for essay. This is the part in senior years where I ask students, how's your college application going? And they say, I'm good, but I still have the essay. I literally hear that over and over again through the month of September and October. And most of the time, they're actually have an essay. They're just not ready to press submit. And I think the thing I want you to know at this point is the essay is important. It is something we read. It's the only part of the application where a student gets to sound like themselves. They get to have a voice. Everything else is a little more cookie cutter in some ways, or lists or things you're saying. But this is where we actually get to see the application come alive. And that's why those creative writing sections of English classes are really good for helping with your college essay. Not because they're going to write fiction, but because thinking about setting and voice and feeling and storytelling usually makes a much better college admission essay if you have those skills or feel comfortable with those skills. The other thing they have to get used to is talking about themselves. Young people don't always do a good job of writing about themselves. They can write about a game they played, they can write about their grandma, they can write about their best friend, but when you actually want them to write about themselves, that's sometimes a little bit tricky. So that's the other thing they can start just thinking about is, what are those moments from my life or my day-to-day life that might make a really good college essay? When we read these, we don't need it to be the saddest or the funniest. Funny is actually really hard in a college essay. But what we need it to do is at the end of it, I want to be able to say, I got to know your child better. That I actually feel like I got to know them a little bit. That's what I'm hoping for from a college essay. So it doesn't have to be the biggest moment from their life, but it has to be the story that really helps explain something about them I didn't already read in their college application. So as a sophomore, they can just start thinking about what they might want to do. There's great resources online. I've read some great essays from here, but I definitely think the hardest part is finding the topic. So those are things you can start to think about now. A is for application. So how many are we going to do? How many do you guys recommend? 9. Ooh, that makes me tired. At the most. Just write that down. It's the most you get. That feels like a lot, right? 9 schools. But it's at some point feels like not enough. How do I narrow down thousands of colleges into 9 schools? It's true. That is, I think, probably the biggest thing you're undertaking over the next year. By the end of your junior year, you should have an idea of some of those 9 schools. Maybe you don't know all 9, but you should have a little bit of an idea. So what questions have you asked? What college fairs have you gone to? What college visits have you done to help you narrow down your list of schools so that you know how many you're going to do? Once you know your schools, you'll know how you're going to apply. There are different application methods, although the Common App still is kind of the king of all applications. So kind of one application for lots of schools. But there are other ones out there, so something to know. And then there's all these dates. 9 schools, probably 9 different dates. When do you have to apply? How am I going to apply? And that's why if at the end of your junior year you have at least a pretty good idea of some of those 9, you're not going to miss any deadlines. You're going to have your stuff put together so that you know at least some of those dates, especially the early ones in your senior year. Some are in October, which with Washington starting post-Labor Day, most places, means that comes really fast. So this is also one of those things where you think, oh, my kid's just a sophomore. I'm saying this to myself right now. This is going to come a lot faster than we all think it is. But there'll be different types of admission, there'll be different types of dates that will be walked through with you. Just know that the more you have kind of ready to go by the start of that senior year, the less stress it's going to be on your student and on yourself. Most colleges, I would say like 90% of them nowadays, do holistic review. So when I'm mentioning all these things, transcripts, recommendations, essays, we're going to talk a little bit about another section, We look at all those things before making a decision. So like if you came up to me and said, what's the likelihood of my kid getting in? I might actually be able to answer that. But it's not just based on a GPA. So it's a lot more things. Your students are allowed to talk about things that disrupted their learning, whether that's COVID or a natural disaster or a family issue. It can be a lot of things. They can write about that on their application. It does not have to be their college admission essay, so know that that's totally available to you. And then there is an activities section. Your students are keeping track of those things, or should be, right? In Naviance, that's part of the fun of that tool, which is great, so they don't have to remember all those things in their senior year. But we're looking for commitment and leadership. So my biggest tip for a sophomore at this point is find something you can commit to that you might do this year, next year, and the year after, so that you can develop leadership. It's hard to just join something and say, I'd like to be the president of this club today. That doesn't happen very often, right? But if you put in the time in your sophomore year, maybe they do elect you to the president position in your junior year, or treasurer or something like that. I told my son, he's going to National Honor Society on Mondays. I was like, why don't you be like secretary next year? He's like, is that what you want me to do? I was like, no, I want you to want to do that, which wasn't how that conversation went. And this is my job, right? He's listening really well. But doing it this year, I think, allows that to happen. We don't want someone who joins a bunch of stuff their senior year. You also don't need the longest list. You can be committed and show leadership through one or two things, right? It can be work, it can be in your community, it can be through your school. It doesn't have to be formal leadership. Maybe it's more informal in terms of like working or doing service. But you have a lot of options here at Bellarmine, and so you can really commit to something over time. And then last is test scores. There's a whole section coming up about test scores, so I'm going to let the counselors take most of my glory here, but I just want to say they're not as important as they used to be. And that is not hard for your kids to understand. That is hard for all of you to understand. I still know my SAT score, have it memorized. I still remember how I felt on those 2 Saturdays. Awful. We don't need our children to go through that if they're not going to schools that need it. So this is the other thing. If you know the list of 6 schools that your kid is going to, and none of them need your test, do you need to take it? No. A lot of us are going test blind, which means even if you take it, we're not looking at it. Doesn't matter. There are still some schools who need it. It does exist. But if you've already narrowed down your choices, your child may not have to remember their SAT a lot of years later. And so that's just something to consider. I think the pre-SAT is a great benchmark just for you to know how you would do or what types of schools you might be interested in. But whether you take the SAT or ACT ultimately will be a choice for most of you. I already told my kid he's not taking it. PLU's free for him. It's one of the benefits of working there. And we're test blind now, so it's good. He did take the PSAT, though. I did force him to do that. All right, final tips. You can get in, really. I promise. There is a school for everyone. Whether it's your first choice or not, I can't promise that, right? But there are great schools out there for every student. So know that most schools, it's easier to get in than you think. You can Google whatever school you're looking at, acceptance rate, and you don't even have to click on anything. It'll tell you exactly what it is. And they're all easier to get into than you probably think they are. You're in charge. I'm not in charge. Schools don't decide where you apply. Schools don't decide where you go. So really have your student take ownership over this process. Try to have some fun with it, as crazy as that sounds. There are people on the other side of an application, and most actually would be fine talking to you. So feel free to reach out, send emails, connect. We want you to engage with us. There are schools that actually look at that as a part of their application holistic review. They look at your engagement with them. Nowadays, I can see if a student opened an email, if they clicked on an email, and then how long they stayed on that website. So can the Gap and Nordstrom. So just know that those are things that sometimes some schools are looking at closely. I'm not, it's just in my system. But some schools do look at those. So expressed interest isn't a bad thing. And then obviously, there are exceptions to every rule. I will stay at the end, but I know you have a lot to talk about today. I just wanted to give you kind of a quick crash course in this. The great thing about being a family here is you'll have tons of support over your next 2.5 years. But I will stay after if anyone has any questions. Who's next? All right. I'm going to stare at all of you.
Yes. All right. Did she thoroughly freak you guys all out? Good. We're right where we want you to be. Good. Okay, so how do we get there? How do we get to this place that we want our students to be by junior year, getting ready to apply to schools, coming back ready senior year, and have their schools ready to go? How do they find out what matters? Well, we have this tool we call Naviance. It's our college search engine that we utilize here. Some of you should be familiar with this if you've had students who have gone through this before. And we have expectations of our students that by sophomore year, they should have done these things. So freshman year, we go in, we introduce Naviance, we have them get signed on, created an account and a profile. And so by now, they should have these completed. They should have their Naviance login and password. They should have a profile created, their resume created, and attempted to do the career interest profiler. That is our hope. And so keep in mind, we will be meeting with all of our sophomores for individual meetings. These meetings will take place before school, after school, or during lunch, and they will meet with their identified counselor. This is our way of getting to know our students, having that one-on-one time with them to build that relationship, that rapport, to ultimately being able to work with them senior year with that college list and to be writing their letters of recommendation. So we try to start that relationship early, so please encourage your students to set up those meetings with us. We will be actually looking for them to do that after spring break, okay? So this is what we are expecting them to have completed when we meet with them. And then looking ahead, so when you talk about fit and what matters, students have no idea what that looks like a lot of times. And so it's always interesting when they come into those meetings after we get through the salutations, how are you doing? All right, what are we thinking about? I don't know. Okay, have you looked at some colleges? No. Do you know what you might want to consider? No. So it's helpful to work with that. Like, you know, I don't know where to go from there. So having students kind of do this pre-work ahead of time starts that conversation, gets them thinking about what do I want in my college experience? Where would I like to go? What are my options? And so we want them to utilize Naviance for the tool that it is. So like Melody touched on, having a resume. We are encouraging students now to get connected, get involved. What are those clubs, those extracurriculars that you've been thinking about that have caught your eye? Maybe you've been doing since middle school and you want to get connected here at Bellarmine. Now's the time, okay? You got here freshman year, you hopefully are acclimated, you have a better understanding of the rigor and how to handle your classes. Now we want you to take it a step further. Get involved, get connected. And so with the resume, they're able to add on to that working resume now, continuing to build upon their opportunities and their interests, and then utilize that resume later if they like for an internship or for a job shadowing opportunity or for a job. It becomes a working document that they can get formatted in Naviance and print off. So it's a great tool. And then the career interest profile. This is a way for them to take an assessment and start really thinking about, what do I like? What do I don't like? Do I like working inside? Do I like working with people? Would I like to work independently? Do I like working with computers or not? And it kind of just goes through an 100-question assessment of kind of picking out and weeding out these interests that your students might have. Some students already have an idea, so this is just another way of them to kind of cross-check that. Does this line up to what they've already been thinking about? So it's a helpful tool, especially for those students who have no idea and really don't know where to start with their interests. And then Naviance also has the college search tool. You can go on there and actually start exploring colleges. All the colleges are right there at your fingertips, so over 3,000 schools are available to you for you to already research. You can start looking at admission rates right there from in Naviance. You can start looking at what the schools have to offer, different programs, find out their deadlines. And so I wanted to show you a couple of these things. So keep in mind, as the parent, you have access to your student's Naviance account. So if this is something that you would like, please reach out to your counselor and we can give you your own password and login. So from here, this is my student Super. And Super is a sophomore. If we were to go to their About Me page, you would see that their account information is here. And we do have the students put in this information, so it's always nice for parents to go and make sure it's accurate. It's always amusing when students are like, I don't know my address, I don't know my phone number, what's an alma mater? So helping students do that is always nice. And then here's the resume where they can continue to add information and then have this be a working document that they can print or export later. And then under self-discovery is where you would find that career interest profiler. And so they would start that assessment here. But what students really like to do, what's fun on here, is that you can start searching colleges. So if I were to look up a school, let's just say that one for no reason at all. It would take me to an overview of PLU. And from this, I'm still in Naviance, from this page, I can look at different pictures. I can actually explore videos. And so this is a great tool for those schools that maybe be out of the state that you want to have access to, but don't have the time to go and visit in person. You can get a real in-depth view of what this school is about, student life, and videos just from this website. Another nice tool is that you can see cost, you can see graduation rate, acceptance rate, and deadlines. But what might be handy to your students that I always like to encourage them to point out is the admissions tool. This is really nice because this actually tracks Bellarmine students from the last 7 years who have applied, and this is for every school. So this is for PLU. These are students who have applied over the last 7 years. So it gives you an idea of, just by numbers, what an average GPA is for a PLU and average test scores, but we're not worried about test scores anymore, right? And so if you click on it, you can see that this student was accepted with an SAT of 1140 and a GPA of 3.5. Checks show that student was accepted. X's showed students who were denied. So this just gives you an idea. This helps the student guide them in this, what matters, what are my options. If I'm a student who has a 3.5 GPA currently, then I know that PLU is probably a strong option for me. Okay? So this is just helping them start to think about what schools are options, what are not, what schools might I be interested in, and how do I find out what matters to me and that fit. And then if they like the school, they can just click on the heart, and then it goes to their schools that they're thinking about list. And so it'll track that. And so when they come back next year as juniors getting ready to complete their application plan, they can go back to this list and look at the schools they've already researched, identified, and say, this is still a school I want to keep as an option. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys just how we utilize Naviance here, how it's a great resource for your students, and how through that we will keep encouraging them and giving them tools and assignments that by senior year they are prepared and ready for applying to colleges. So with this information, we're going to help them be ready for that next step. All right, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Katie Keene. It's great to see so many of you here tonight. This college application process, it really can be stressful. And I know I'm on my second one now, and I'm the counselor, right? And it's still a little bit stressful, but we're here definitely to ease you. I hope some of you are already becoming more comfortable with the application process and what's to come. But it's time to start thinking about whether or not your student would want a standardized test score as they apply to college. I'm gonna move this aside here. So I like to approach this idea similar to Melody's mindset, that families should not over-invest in this and perhaps over-prioritize this over other pieces of the application. And everything else needs to be taken into perspective with what's on your student's plate. We have some really strong overachievers here who go out for all kinds of clubs, activities, AP classes, and things like that. So I just want you to take it all into perspective. Let's see. Okay, so also following up with what the information was shared briefly with Melody and the factors that go into evaluating each applicant for admissions, I think it's important to emphasize right here that the test scores aren't the only indicator of readiness anymore. The colleges are doing ongoing research to determine that. So with 1,800 plus colleges that are deciding to go test optional or test blind, there's been a significant increase in the applications number, just the sheer number of applications to colleges. Statistics indicate that 48 to 60%, you can see, of students apply with a test score. That means of those that apply, 50% of all of those students that are accepted have a test score. So the other 50% don't. They don't have a test score. So it could go either way. In an effort to be fair in the evaluation of each applicant, it's just really important to know that colleges definitely, you've heard it from Melody tonight, have shifted to a more holistic approach. Let's see here. So let me try to figure out why that's clicking on that. Sorry about that. You can go to fairtest.org to find this up-to-date list of colleges and universities who are test optional or test blind. So if your student is the anxious type, please know there are plenty of colleges that do not accept test scores or are test optional. And if they see that list, as Melody mentioned, they may not decide to go further with testing. And you might be asking yourself, so why test at all, right? Well, I'm going to tell you in a little secret that most of our students don't know where they want to go as a young person. And they may not even really decide that until May of their senior year, which would be entirely too late. So that's why we recommend all students take a standardized test in case they do need a test score to be considered. So there's a few outliers, like MIT, Georgetown, the Military Academy, that still do require test scores, as well as some in the South. Happy to report Washington entirely is test optional or test blind. So you'll hear more about that next year when you have juniors. We'll go into more specifics. But they will, if they go ahead and test, as we recommend, then they'll at least have a test score under their belt should they need it. So it's more helpful that way. Also, I just want to mention one other thing that we recommend is a good reason to have a test score. Did you know that the average grade reported on college applications is an A? It is also shortly after that a B. So you're looking at a lot of applicants with just an A GPA in general. So you may decide that, you know, during COVID, your student had a dip in their grades. Maybe your super smart student doesn't always reach their potential, and perhaps a test score would help solidify for a college that they know that they are truly ready, that perhaps they just didn't do all the coursework. They are intelligent and bright enough to do that. So, and then also just because an A in one school doesn't necessarily compare to an A in some other lower performing school district. So that's still why some of the universities, I believe, use test scores to somehow bring that into, you know, some sort of a fair comparison. But fortunately, you know, colleges do consider historical, the understanding of the school and the context. So we're grateful for that. Okay, so you're looking at this traditional testing timeline, and the students have already begun practicing this year as they took the PSAT, and we're going to give them one more opportunity to do another practice in the fall in October as juniors. And they may decide also to look for a practice ACT test in the fall to see which one they perform better on. They'll want to study and prepare for the one that they score higher on. And the most popular time for kids to take that first official SAT or ACT test is going to be in the spring of that junior year. And the reason they emphasize that is because it is at that point that the students have learned most of the material and the content within the test. You'll also be aware that during the spring is a competitive time to test because you have so many looking for a test site. So be sure to register early. That process does take some effort to get into sometimes. It's a little bit, seems like a lottery system when you log in if you can get signed up for that date. If it fills, it fills. So you're looking maybe elsewhere 20 miles down the road. So just be attentive to that. They want you to register at least 5 weeks in advance to a test. So keep that in mind too to come up with this plan. But if you have a high-flying sophomore who does take advanced classes, you might begin testing earlier. Ideally, you want students to have 1 or 2 tests under their belt to finish the junior year off and to take advantage of super scoring. Is super scoring a familiar term to you all? Do you know what that is? So you can take the highest score from a subsection of each test date, and together those high scores from the multiple test dates give you that composite score. So it's called super scoring. And 3/4 of the colleges out there will accept a super score. So something to consider. I think it's also important that I emphasize, don't make your child take 5, 6, 7 times over. It really isn't worth the investment, and their trajectory does not continue to increase. The big thing to remember is you want students to have all their testing done. You can see that magnifying glass there. No later than the fall of their senior year so that you will have test scores returned back to you before college admissions. So test prep is a key part of improving your students' scores. This will come in the future, nothing to rush into at this point. Research says that the scores generally through test prep will increase about 150 to 300 points on the SAT and possibly 1 to 3 points on the ACT. And it's really a test that's not necessarily straightforward and easy for students to do well in. So there's strategies to be learned. And just, I think the more familiarity they have with the test, the more emotional regulation they have. Instead of getting so stressed out, they can time themselves through it and do better. And of course, you can invest as much or as little time in test prep as you want. In the Counseling Center, we do have a resource page that our students have used in the past. It's not an exhaustive list, but you're welcome to it. I think one resource I will specifically mention is Tutors Across America. How many of you received their postcard in the mail? A handful of you. I've also sent out an email that you may have found in your box in January, the end of January, that you can refer back to. I feel like this company, I've invited them here. They'll be here March 17th through the 19th. I feel like it's the biggest bang for your buck because it's only $199 for 20 hours of instruction in a large group format. So they cover both SAT and ACT in this session. And of course, if you need financial assistance, please see me. We will gladly get you into that free of charge. We want to support you there. And sophomores are all welcome to attend. Of course, you can put it off till next year. I'll invite them again, possibly this summer in August if you want to wait. Not to worry. There's no urgency in this. So have you seen your students' PSAT score? Could you give me a little signal that you've seen it? Okay, quite a handful of you. If you haven't, you can log in to collegeboard.org and see, is it org or com? Org, yeah. You can see their score. So on College Board, they also have a pretty great video to explain how the scoring happens and what each score means, if you would like a deeper understanding. But I think they're fairly easy to read. If you're a data fan, you're looking at this slide with a smile or disappointment, I'm not sure. You can see the range of the scores. And you might notice there's some room for improvement. Don't panic. In general, there's been just a national trend that has decreased in scores. So we do fall under that category a little bit. But I should remind you that students typically haven't learned all the content yet. So this is another reason why those scores have or just appear to be low. And this one, the National Merit Scholarship, I don't want to spend too much time explaining this one because it's more of a scholarship opportunity as well as recommendation and commendation for the juniors who take this and score in the top 3 to 4% of our state. But something just to keep in mind that next year your student might be eligible for recognition and scholarships. So we'll cover that next year in more detail. Now this one, have you heard that testing's going digital? This is something the College Board is initiating with the PSAT in the fall. So your students are going to be the first group that come through and we'll take it digitally. Then we're going to have the SAT come out in the spring, so they will already sort of had the precursor and the practice to be able to do that in the spring. They'll be able to use their personal iPads and laptops for the test, and we'll help them basically download the program. It'll be all inclusive of a calculator, the highlight tools, the underscoring, everything will be within that program as they go through it. I think perhaps the most exciting part of this change is that the time will decrease. It's typically been over a 3-hour test, and now the test will be reduced to 2 hours and 15 minutes. And unfortunately, if your student requires accommodations the test will still be delivered in a paper format, so a very long test. The big reason this test is going to be shorter is due to the structural changes of the test, as well as the reading portions. They've made it more concise and straightforward. I think when we were students, they used to be like this huge, long section of reading to do, and then they would ask you like 10 questions. Well, now there is just a short excerpt from whatever reading material they've pulled it from, whatever book, and then it's going to have one STEM question. That's it. And then it's going to go on to another one. So, and then finally, I think most significantly about the scoring, how it's changed, is it's going to be an adaptive test. So as the student answers questions, depending on right or wrong, it will deliver the next question. So there are some changes coming. And then I'm going to leave you with these 3 things. Testing is still always about what works for your student, and whether their colleges are test optional or blind. So we encourage you to take them both to compare. There will always be one that they fare better on. And then take into consideration the application deadlines that you want to make sure your results are back in time. So with that, I will leave you and let you know you are over halfway through this. It's almost time to end.
You guys still awake? Need a stretch break? Should we all stand up and jump up and down for a minute? Okay. So I'm going to talk to you guys about some extracurricular and summer opportunities. So talking about how applications are more holistic, this is really important. A lot of your students are so focused on grades that sometimes they forget to do other things. And we get them in for meetings with us, and we talk to them, and we're like, hey, tell us about yourself. Because we meet with our sophomores starting after spring break. And we'll say, tell us about yourself. What are you interested in? What do you do? I go to school. Okay, what else do you do? I go to school. That's it. They're not involved in stuff. Some of them are really involved, but some are like the polar opposite. And especially post-COVID, it's been really hard for kids to kind of find their like niche, what they want to be involved in. So help us out. We need them to do stuff because colleges are paying attention. So there's lots of activities. There's tons of stuff to do here to get kids involved. And we need them to be involved in things, but we want them to be involved in things they're passionate about. One of the things that Melody mentioned is the consistency and the longevity and taking on leadership roles. We're not expecting them to start joining a club and then immediately be the president of that club or the secretary of that club. But we do want them to join something that hopefully they aspire to be a leader or one day be in charge of. So some of the activities that look good, not that any activity looks bad, but being in charge of Smash Brothers Club is probably not going to look as good as being in charge of Model United Nations. That's, if you want to be a political science major someday. So if you want to be computer science or maybe game design or something like that, then you want to pick something that's appropriate to that. So some examples, Student Senate and student activities are really great opportunities, and I know that we are in the process of talking about creating more leadership opportunities for students, so just watch the space, as my husband would say. So clubs, sustainability reps, I always plug FAB, Feminists at Bellarmine, because I'm the moderator of that club. Again, Model United Nations, lots of leadership opportunities there and opportunities for students to get out in front of other people and show how smart they are and how they can speak in front of other people. There's tons of ministry opportunities, lectors, Eucharistic ministers, being on retreats as a leader and being a crew person on a retreat. Students often think, oh, I just did crew. That's still a great service opportunity, and that is a huge time commitment to be able to do that for a retreat. And very selfless, I might add. Special programs, there's Evergreen Girls and Boys State, and these opportunities are listed if you go to Naviance and you go to the student I believe it's under summer activities or special programs, you can see the drop down, and it has all of these things. It has the summer programs that are educational opportunities. I know because I'm updating them all the time. So you can see what's on there for these, as well as these other special programs. Women in Science, there's an engineering program at University of Washington, as well as several other colleges during the summer. There's the Multi-Care Academy. It used to be called Nurse Camp. Now it's called the Multi-Care Academy for Students in Healthcare. Zoo volunteers at Point Defiance, if you have a student that's interested in maybe zoology or biology or marine biology or anything that has to do with animals, possibly vet, that's awesome. And there's all kinds of business summer opportunities for students. Not just at University of Washington, there's one at PLU, there's several at other schools if your student's looking at maybe going to an East Coast school or someplace in the Midwest. Oftentimes schools look to see if your student is involved with something maybe prior to attending their school. So it is good if you have a kid that's like, I want to go to Notre Dame. Look at Notre Dame's summer program. That's a good idea, show interest in that school ahead of time. But try to get them involved. You can see it's on Naviance under scholarships and enrichment programs. That's where it is. I just had to look in the yellow box. It's been a long day. But you want to make sure that you're getting your kid involved, not just in these summer things, but also in programs here. So it doesn't have to be just sports, doesn't have to be just one thing, but whatever they're picking, my biggest advice to students is choose something that you like, that you're going to stick with. They don't want to see that your kid's doing this, and then this, and then this, and then the next year they're changing their mind to this, this, and this. Pick something that you want to stay with. 2 activities that you've been consistent in is much better than 7 activities that you did for like a quarter or a semester. Okay? Leadership opportunities. Schools are looking for students that are involved in leadership. So that is huge. If you have a kid that has risen to the top and taken on being a team captain, being a secretary or a vice president or a president of a club, and even better, if they have started something for themselves and gotten others to join them, that's even better. And then volunteering and charity work. More and more schools are looking for this. And I know that we require 30 hours of service work. That's not enough. That's just not enough. You need to do more. They need to do more. Just doing the bare minimum is not enough, especially coming from a Jesuit school. If they're going to be applying to another Jesuit institution or another school that requires service, they want to see that they're taking charge and doing more than that. And a lot of schools are looking to see that kids are starting their own charities. So I can tell you from prior experience, some of our students that have gotten into some top institutions, the thing that was the leading edge for them was the fact that they started their own charity and that it was successful and that they passed it down to other people. So that's something to be thinking about as well. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Scotty, who's going to talk to you about sports.
Well, before I start, Melody shared some great things about stress and just testing. So I thought I'd share this story real quick about my daughter. She had a soccer game the other day, and she gave up a goal. It was her fault. She was trying to guard her player, and it went in, and all of a sudden the coach yelled at her. She got shaken. My wife and I are looking at each other like, uh-oh, what's going to happen? She's got a little anxiety. So she went to go throw the ball in, and you'll like this, Mary. She threw the ball in like a basketball. It's supposed to go over your head. She just completely forgot what to do. She was 11 years old. She's really good. My wife and I both played soccer. It's like, what is going on? We didn't know what to be, mad, frustrated, or empathetic. We were like looking at each other. My point is, we lose ourselves sometimes when we have too much stress. And I think testing is such a good thing now for students, having those options, test optional. And I had a student come into my room. She picked every single path of least resistance to go through. I'm like, wait a second, you don't have to have a teacher recommendation. You don't have to take a test. You're smart. And she just kind of giggled like, I know. So there's not just one way of doing things, like testing is one example where we have, and again, we've all probably taken the SATs, right? And now there's this, I'm like, where was this when I was a kid? So I think that's important to know. You have choices. I think that's been laid out a few times. Test blind. They don't even want to see it. I like those schools. But speaking of stress, what your students won't have to worry about is seeing us when they come for their sophomore meeting. And we welcome that, and it's not, I love it. Like, I come in the room one time, and everybody's like, oh, you're in trouble. The counselor, oh, wow, you're going to be in trouble. No, we want to meet with them, and that first sophomore meeting is going to be in the springtime. It's just going to be, 10, 15 minutes, where we're just going to get to know them. This is really exciting for us. I work with some great counselors. I don't hear a lot of yelling. I hear laughing and students being really interested. I mean, we really want to get to know students here. We have wonderful staff, obviously, teachers here. So I know for me, I'm looking forward to getting to know them. That's our first window. So they should be really open to doing that. So please go home and tell them, when you have your first meeting with your counselor, open up. But they want to know about what you're doing, especially outside of Bellarmine. There's so many students that are involved with Bellarmine activities, but so many of them are doing like gymnastics, or they're in, not Cub Scouts, but they're like Eagle Scouts, or high-level gymnastics, or other sports and other music. So we want to hear about those things. That's part of how we're getting to know them. With NCAA information, all this stuff is in our office. A lot of students are looking forward to playing sports as early as freshman year all the way up into junior. We want to make sure that they're getting if coaches are reaching out to them, they're having a release sign so we can give out the transcripts for them. So we're not able to release those transcripts until they do so. One of the great things about this, you can see number 2 is registering for the NCAA Eligibility Center. So they've updated that website, by the way. So there's 3 different options you can do. One is free. It'll give you all the information you need. The second option actually is for more students that are transferring. So they're playing Division III and they're transferring in Division I and Division II, or they're international students. And then the last one, the third option, is if they're wanting to play Division I or Division II. So that's a way for coaches to see everything about them, their test scores, their transcripts, all in one place, and it gives all the information about schools. The cost went up. I think it was I think it's $100 now. It's well worth it if they're if they're serious athletes, if they've been doing let's say use soccer for example. A lot of students will play some clubs. They're getting scouted. They're going to ID camps in different states. That can go for all the other sports. So very worthwhile. And we have packets. If you're interested, feel free to email me. There's a packet on the website that has all that information. Okay, but it's really handy on the website. There's not really a big concern for the eligibility because if they're going to Bellarmine, they're going to get everything that they need. So those are for a lot of students that are kind of transferring in from Bellarmine. But even having said that, their eligibility will be okay. But that's a way to just double check. Okay. So Division II, they talk about 2.3 core GPA. Division I, Division II. And then my other slide is about the military academies and ROTC. Okay, so we're looking to have if your student is interested in attending an academy, and you can see the list of the academies, we are going to have an informational meeting and ROTC we're going to have reps from the U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Air Force Academy, U.S. Navy, and then West Point, And then two probably recommend ROTs from PLU. So there's a gentleman named John Govea, I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He is the go-to for anything ROTC. He has so much information. I've been just reaching out to him and letting other students reach out to him. He will let them know everything about ROTC, the different schools, and everything they need to do before they begin the application process. And he is going to be here as well. We have these representatives are fantastic. We're actually going to have a new representative from West Point, and he's going to bring 2 of his active duty personnel. So it's going to be exciting. And March 29th to 30th, we don't know yet. We'll most likely have it in the theater, just be for students. Here's what, and Mrs. Irving and I were talking about this. Last year we had juniors. This year we want to open that up to sophomores. So sophomores and juniors, because juniors is almost, they're getting down to the crunch time. We want them to prepare. I think we've had some interest already with a lot of sophomores. So that's going to be really interesting to see both juniors and sophomores. Yeah, so those students should attend these panel speakers. They're absolutely fantastic. I may just bring my brother along too. He's a lieutenant colonel from the Marines, and another, people are really interested in learning about the academies and serving. There'd be a lot of good people there. Okay, and then just the timelines for the ROTC. You just make sure you're looking at the college websites. But again, the websites for all the academies are really explanatory. We went to NACAC this summer and got it inside on the application process. It was really interesting and so, if students are interested, they can talk to us as well. But one of them was interesting about, I think it was Air Force Academy, in the math that they're taking that we didn't know about. So, and one of them was about, because everybody's, we have to take calculus, AP calculus. Well, they had some inside information that nobody really knew. What wasn't it? Statistics was a big one that people didn't know that they needed to take instead. But anyway, little tidbits are important. These representatives just have tons of information and stories and ways to motivate. We did last year have another representative come online through a Zoom from the Merchant Marines, and he was out of New York. He's actually at NACAC too. But he will not be joining us this year. But everyone else, fantastic representative. So I think that's it. Yeah, do we have any questions? We'll probably stay here for the next few minutes, so you can feel free to come up and... Melody? For Melody too? Yes? Anybody here? Oh.
Yeah, have them reach out to their counselor. So if they don't remember their Naviance login or you don't have a Naviance login, just reach out to their counselor and we can reset their password and we can send you, if you don't have a login for whatever reason, we can set you up with one. Or if your email is incorrect for whatever reason, we can fix that too. Yeah. What's the best way to get in touch with us? Okay, so honestly, email. If you send us a message through Blackbaud, we check them occasionally, but that's not our primary way to check. I know that's confusing because teachers check Blackbaud all the time. We do look at it, but don't be mad at us if we don't get it right away because we get inundated with emails throughout the day. So we do check the email and the Blackbaud, but email's the best way. Yeah. So just our last name, first initial at bellarmineprep.org.
Yeah, but if you think it's better for a conversation, we're happy. Just give us a call.
Or just call us. Yeah. We have phone numbers. On the website, if you go to the directory, the Bellarmine website, on the directory, all of our pictures are on there, and it has our phone number and our extension. So you can either call our extension directly, or you can just call the main line, which normally rings up to our counseling office, and Jeannie will put you right through to us. Yeah.
Email is just last name, first initial.
Yeah. Hi, yeah, you. You should have your own login for Naviance. So your kiddos should have put in an email for you. But if you don't have one, email their counselor and we can set you up. Yeah. Yeah. No, we're no longer a host site for SAT on Saturday, but we are going to have one in the fall of their senior year. We will do that, but we're no longer hosting the Saturday SAT because what was happening, at least this is what my understanding is, so don't quote me directly on this and then be like, Mrs. Irving said this, is that we were getting a lot of students that were not our students coming and testing on Saturdays. And so what was happening was a lot of Bellarmine students were being forced out and then having to go test elsewhere. So we were becoming a Saturday test site for other kids, but not for our kids. And so we decided to just eliminate that. So that's kind of what happened. But it's possible we could become one again, but from what I understand, we're not a Saturday test site right now. But we are doing school day SATs when needed. Yeah. Yeah. Another one, yeah. You only get one. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm teasing.
So do colleges prefer one standardized test over another, or?
That's, you want to answer that one? Straight from the horse's mouth here. Yeah.
No. Yeah, so I think the tips from before are they do test very differently. One has science and history, one does not. What type of math they're testing. So it's really about what test your student does better, which is also part of the reason some of us don't look at them anymore because that seems weird. But yeah, so try them out and see which one works best. Do the practice. That's a nice way to see. If you look at fairtest.org, it actually shows you there's a column. It says permanently, which means, they can always change their mind, but they have made a choice to tell you permanently. Or it'll say until fall 2026 when they're doing a 4-year assessment to see how this works. So you can actually see that on the site, but I think they're saying 80% of those 1,800 are permanently.
So Chris, when Chris and I were at NACAC, which it's the National Association of College College Admission Counselors. It's a big convention. So we're using all these acronyms, which is annoying. I know education people do that a lot. And so when we were there were tons of admissions people from all over the country there, and lots of admissions counselors, and then lots of admissions people like what Melody does. And one of the things that I went and sat in on the Future of Testing seminar. And one of the things that they said is what they're doing to try and decide how they want to proceed forward with, do we want to stay test optional or test blind, what are we doing, is that they're looking at classes of students that have been admitted with testing, because right now they have a mix right now. So they have some students that have been admitted with testing, and then students that have been admitted test optional or test blind. And then they're comparing how do those students fare academically versus their students that got admitted with testing, and they're comparing their grades. And right now, they're not seeing a whole lot of difference. So if that tends to be the trend, then they're staying test optional and test blind. But if they see, so they're doing a study every year, and if it tends to go downhill, then they'll make a change. But for right now, a lot of those schools are seeing no difference in how students are faring. So that's why they're continuing to stay the way they are. There are some stubborn schools, Georgetown, that are insistent upon having testing back again, and that's frustrating for us. And then other schools, like in the Deep South, where Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, the state requires it. And that's more for meeting requirements for their graduation, because those are alternate pathways to graduation requirements for that state for students. So that's the difference there. Some schools are for merit scholarships, but there are a lot of schools where that's not the case anymore. So you'll have a school like Boise, where Boise has the WUI scholarship, and the WUI used to be measured, the Western Undergraduate Exchange Scholarship used to be measured based on what your test score was and your GPA. Now it's just based solely on your test score. Or your GPA. I knew that, yeah.
And I think that same website does also include some notes about scholarship. It is getting to be fewer and far between. That first year it kind of happened, there was like we're going to keep it for merit for a couple schools, but we're finding that a lot of the schools have seen the inequity of saying we're not going to take it for admission, but we are going to take it for merit. So a lot have actually gone, if they don't need it for admission, they don't need it for merit scholarships. So you're finding that trend is actually becoming more and more positive. Like I think there's one Washington school who happens to be in this city who still needs it. It's not us, who still needs it for some merit scholarships, but it's because of how their endowment set those up. So they're trying to change it, but yeah, we're finding most schools are going away from that. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So College Board's test does not, it's set up for the PSAT that scholarship goes towards. It's not the SAT. They don't need to follow it up with an SAT. The National Merit Scholarship. You just take the PSAT. And then from that, they determine the top 3 to 4% of our state. So they allot so many per state. Our state is allotted, I think it's about 33. And so that works out to be the top 3 to 4% of our test takers, because in Washington we tend to be higher. So that's why it's more limited. Yeah, it's all on the.
Nothing to do with SAT anymore.
No, that still happens for the top 1. Yeah, the top 1%.
Is verified by your school. The application, all the verification process happens. No.
The timeline that I had on that one slide really reflects more of the progression of the application, and they'll ask for, like you mentioned, the essay. For that top 1%, it's really tough. If your student is brilliant and does really well, like almost a perfect score, they'll probably land in that time frame, and then they have to still go through the sequence. They'll have to have an essay, they'll have to have the transcript, and they'll take those things into consideration, and then it goes from 16,000 nationally down to 15,000. And then from there, they get whittled down. And then there's 3 types of scholarships that come into play at that point for the winners. So they may get full rides to colleges that are participating. They may get some that are based on their career interest, because the university really features that particular major. They want to fund them and encourage them to go there. And then some get merit. They get money towards whatever college they want to go to. So, it is highly lucrative when you look at the big number of dollars that they give out, but it's very, very, very competitive. And the final outcome of that is not until their senior year, so you won't even know about it for months to come.
We actually had a student that qualified to be a finalist a few years back prior to COVID. And the only thing that kept them from being a finalist was that they didn't do their essay, as much as it pains me to tell you that. No. You know who I'm talking about. But, yeah. Let me answer part 2 first. Absolutely. I would tell them, yes. I'm kind of notorious for my bluntness, so yes, I would. Yeah,
Tell your student, have your counselor go read this, and then read what.
yeah, and in the fall of their senior year, we have these sessions called Appy Hours that we do pretty much all through September and all through October, where we're like, we'll bring the snacks, you bring the apps. And I know that doesn't rhyme, but they come up to our offices and bring their applications, their essays, whatever, we review them. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat there and said, I hope you didn't work too long on this, because we're just gonna, yeah. And we also have a preschool starting application boot camp with Melody, where she gives them all the these are the do's, these are the don'ts. These, don't write about this, don't write about that, you maybe write about that. And then we go to their senior comp classes and also talk to them about the same thing. These are the do's, these are the don'ts. And you would be shocked at how many kids come in and they're like, I wrote the best sports essay. And I'm like, you need to just erase that right now. So it happens a lot. But normally they listen to us and we sit there and brainstorm with them. So yes, we do. And then topics that they should talk about. Do you want to speak to that? Okay.
It's a hard thing for them to start to consider now, but we do activities during that session of what stickers are on your water bottle, what photos do you have on your bedroom walls, because those are things you're clearly putting out in the world. Is there potentially a story around one of those things that you could write about? But there's not any essay you can't write about, right? But there's essays where I always say you should proceed with caution, because we've read 7,000 of them. So we're harping on the sports essay, which is not to say none of your children can write a sports essay. They can. But I can't learn more about football or their injury or how mad the coach was at them than I'm learning about who they are. So if sports is the vehicle in which I'm learning about them, there's a way to do that. What I find is that's actually really hard for young people. I get really invested in who won the game, but I know nothing about that student. So the sports essay is one to proceed with caution. The essay about your favorite person actually is one to proceed with caution, because again, I don't want to find out more about your mom than I do about you, right? So it's so much easier to write about something else than to write about myself. And a lot of those essays that we all know about start to sound generic when we read them. So I always say have someone read it who doesn't know you very well. Actually, a counselor is not a horrible person. They get to know them, but they don't know them like you know them, right? So have them read it, and if they felt they got to know you better, if they felt like, I didn't know that about you, or that's a really cool way of saying that, that is I am on the right track. Also, read it out loud. No, it is not supposed to be a brag list. We also talk about that in the essay workshop. If it's just a list of all the things you're great at, that's really boring. And there's a whole activity section where you get to do that, right? So, one of my favorite essays was about cologne shopping. And they talked about how different smells brought them to different times in their life, right? They're not bragging about themselves. It's also doesn't sound like the saddest day of their life, but it was a really interesting way to describe how they grew up, right? And some unique things about their family and their choices, but mostly about them. And so, no, I think introverted kids, humble kids can do really well on a college essay, but they do have to write about themselves. Yeah.
There's 6 different prompts, too, if that helps kind of tip you into some domain to answer the essay. Also, we really encourage the students to just Google and search up award-winning essays. You will really learn a lot about just the flow of some really great ones. It might start them brainstorming.
We have a couple coming up in the spring. We always have two that we do in the spring. We have the JET, which is the Jesuit Excellence Tour, and then we have the Arrow College Fair, which is, it's a lot of different colleges that come, but the Jesuit Excellence Tour is usually in May, and then the Arrow is usually in February or March. So they come and they set up, usually the Arrow's up here, and it's just kind of in this whole vestibule up here, and we have a bunch of colleges, it's like 20 colleges. And then the JET we have usually outside in the quad because it's usually nice and we're able to do that. And so we have a couple that we host on campus. And then the other thing that we do is in the fall, and you'll see this listed on Naviance, we have colleges that come and visit. So we have over, I don't know how many, 100 colleges that come to our campus in the fall. And we list the visits on Naviance. Students can sign up to visit, and then they can come and meet directly with the people that are usually reading their apps. So Melody will come from PLU and meet with students, give them a little spiel on PLU, get their contact information, and then they are able to sit and talk to her and ask her direct questions. And we have colleges all over the country that come, some from Canada, some from overseas. We had St. Andrews come one year, so there's a lot of schools. We work on building relationships with these schools. We tour colleges ourselves and build connections with admissions. I just got back last week from Southern California, where I was touring colleges in Southern California and talking to their admissions reps who know us by first name. So, I mean, we work to cultivate these relationships so that these schools will come and see us and meet our kids. So. Well, certain schools, they value those relationships, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for all schools. So just because they know us doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give us an advantage. But for some schools, we have an advantage because we're a Jesuit, institution. Sometimes it can come into play when we want to appeal a student's decision. So that can be helpful. And just because they know me, I am the chair of the department, right? So I can make a phone call and say, hey, it's me. I want to talk to you about this. So.
And we share resources.
Yeah.
So we meet weekly. We discuss students. If we have a school that we know is offering something great, we share that with everybody. If we have a student that we're kind of struggling with, we don't know how to support this, we staff it with each other so that we can all use our resources.
Yeah, we all talk. I mean, there's only 4 of us, and we all travel too. It's not just me. I'm not, I'm not the only one that goes places. Tawana goes places. Katie goes. Chris. We all go. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. The which workshop? Oh, well, I send out an email in the summer, and it's open to everybody. So anybody can come, and we do it before school starts. So it's usually on picture day. That's usually when we do it, yeah. So it's before school starts. So it's any senior can attend, yeah.
Place where kids can find like community service options or internships or like where do they look for?
So all of those opportunities, where did I say it was? On Naviance, I think it was in the yellow square. Enrichment. Scholarships, enrichment programs. Not necessarily internships are going to be listed there, but there will be some summer programs listed there. Yeah, so there's things listed there on that section of Naviance. I don't know why I don't know that, but Katie has more information too.
We get kids asking us personal questions, so we dig in and do the research with them if they're looking for something in whatever their future career interest is. Recently, I've had some students come in interested in looking for basically leadership opportunities and working with children. Something that I dug into and found was Camp Seymour, YMCA. You can also find there's a couple other camps around that use the golf courses during the summer, and summertime is a great time to get those experiences in. And they even pay at the YMCA if your student is 16. They train the kids through a leadership program as well. So I feel like I'm giving them a shout out, a plug. But Osprey Camp, there's a whole bunch of great opportunities where students can go volunteer to be referees. There's also, I've Googled it before, just on a volunteer opportunities, and it took me to a website that listed a whole bunch of nonprofit organizations that were offering just random events that they could get involved in. But also, I mean, really the summer learning opportunities are really vast. There are so many ways to get the student to be exposed to whatever their future career path might look like. Medical ones are huge, STEM. There's even entrepreneurship camps and different ways for kids to travel the world. There's, what is the one that my student's done twice now? Global Leadership Association, I think, GLA. A student can go across the world and do conservation efforts. They can do things down in impoverished countries and build for 2 weeks. Of course, those ones are more expensive, but there's some opportunities for everyone, really.
There's another question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. International schools. Naviance has international schools on it.
Yeah, we in America have, it's dependent if you're looking at 4-year or 2-year, but I think we have nearly 4,000 different universities, colleges, 2-year programs. But Naviance also incorporates thousands outside of our country, so you can really explore.
Yeah, they have schools in Spain, Italy, the UK. Yeah. Virgin Islands. We were actually just looking at a school for a student in the Virgin Islands the other day. So, yeah.
I have a student determined to live in Jamaica.
Yes. Yeah. I have first dibs. Sorry. And just for reference points for UK, my husband's from the UK, so I have kind of a line on all the colleges in the UK too. So that is helpful. And I have a student that's studying in Wales right now, so that just graduated last year. So we have kids that are actually there. And in Canada, lots in Canada. We have students in 3 overseas countries right now, I believe, that graduated last year. So. Yeah. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening.